Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, What You Need to Know. I'm Yonina Shineweather, CPA, and I'm the Consulting Director of Compliance at Viventium. And with me is my colleague, Malka Trump, CPA, CPP, the Director of Compliance at Viventium. And together, we're going to be dialoguing about the latest in relief legislation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you all know, legislation has been coming out fast and furious, leaving us all breathless, and also dealing with the basic uncertainty of this time. So first of all, on a personal note, I just want to wish that each of you and your families and your loved ones are all staying safe and weathering this difficult and uncertain time. And to say that on our part, from Viventium, we're here to support you in any way possible from the payroll HR compliance side with the information you need to be able to access the relief that Congress has passed. And we're partnering with you in this to give you as much information, digested, easy to understand, hands-on as possible. And that's what this webinar is all about today. So just a couple of administrative points that I want to mention. The first is that today's webinar is being recorded for future reference. The second is that, I'm not sure if everyone caught this, but this is a 30-minute webinar in order to respect everyone's time. We're all over our heads and swamped, with just trying to keep up with everything that's going on, both running our businesses and learning about all the new changes, and most of us working remotely. Also want to mention that Malka and I, of course, are not in a workplace because our workplaces are in New York and New Jersey. And so we are both working from home. So if you hear any interesting information or sounds going on in the background, you'll chalk that up to the, to the COVID-19 situation right now. And also, probably most importantly, please use your question toolbar that appears on your GoToWebinar toolbar and type in questions as we go along. I always say, and those of you who've been with me for webinars before, I say that if there's something that I'm explaining that's not clear enough to you, or I'm speaking too fast, or I'm going through information too fast, any question that you have, probably a lot of other of our listeners today have as well. And so you really be doing everyone a favor by asking your question. And I really do keep my eye on the questions as we go along. Again, we're doing only a half-hour webinar, and so we're probably not going to have time at the end for a Q&A, but I will try to work as many of your questions into the presentation as possible. So please do go ahead and use it. Let's get started. First of all, phase 3 of relief had been passed by Congress last Friday, March 27, and signed into law by the president. Doesn't mean we're done with relief yet. I know they're now working on a phase 4, which may contain a similar direct payment to taxpayers and other provisions that will affect us all. But this is really, this 880-page legislation, which is what the CARES Act is quite historic. I mean, last week, those of you who were with me for our earlier webinar on the FFCRA credit, which was paid leave, we spoke about that was already unprecedented because it was the first time that there was paid leave on the federal level, as well as paid FMLA for childcare. And I think the bill of this week, the CARES bill, the CARES law, the CARES Act, really does top all of that. There's never been a $2 trillion relief and stimulus package before, and then the biggest one was probably about $800 billion. Somewhere around 2008 or something. So just to have an idea of where these funds are going, Viventium's prepared for you this nifty little pie chart, which is based on the CRFB report. And as you can see, the largest chunk, which is over $500 billion, goes to support loans and loan guarantees, basically for big business. And a close second is small business loans and grants, which probably I would venture to say that most of our listeners today are most interested in this one. That applies to employees of less than 500 employers of less than 500 employees. So we're going to be talking about that, and what information Viventium is providing our clients about that. Unemployment expansion, a lot of shoring up of state unemployment programs. And of course, there are the direct payments that we're all familiar with. and a cut in various taxes. So there's basically, a wide range of aid being extended. And even before we jump into the payroll provisions, what I want to do is just do a little overview, give a nod, I might say, in the direction of non-payroll issues, just so that we're all on the same page and we're all familiar with what's going on, and allow you to enter any questions that you may have about that, although it's not really directly payroll related. So first of all, of course, there are the direct payments, which will be based on 2018 returns unless a 2019 return has already been filed. Taxpayers who don't normally file returns will be able to send in some type of a form in order to provide information to receive this payment. And of course, it's going to be $1,200 per individual, or for a married couple, it would be $2,400 and $500 per child. Again, all of this is meant to tide people over at this difficult time and just, be there and show that the federal government cares. And I think we can all at this point, appreciate all that both our federal and our state governments and are doing to try to, keep us all afloat. Unemployment's being expanded. There are going to be 13 weeks of extended emergency unemployment. There'll be an additional $600 federal payment on top of the state funds. Charity deduction is going to be now, at least for COVID-related charities, it's going to be an above-the-line deduction as opposed to a below-the-line, subject to below-the-line limits. So they're expanding the charity deductions. Small business loans, which will be forgivable and will become grants. So some of you may be saying, well, why is she putting that under non-payroll? And the reason I'm putting that under non-payroll is because this is not something that's being administrated by the IRS or by the Department of Labor. This is something that's running through the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and it's not really, strictly speaking, a payroll benefit, like we're going to talk about on the next slide. But payroll information is necessary in order to qualify for this. And those of you who are with Viventium, Viventium is going to be providing you the information that you need to base your decisions on for you to take to your financial advisors or to your bankers or to your authorized lenders and help you apply for the loan. NOLs are going to be expanded in terms of there's always limitations how far you can carry back or carry forward your company's NOL, that you're going to be freed up to use more of those. Interest expense for loan repayments is going to be expanded, so you can take greater, they're expecting people to obviously have more, lines of credit and lending going on, borrowing going on, I should say, so they are allowing a greater interest expense deduction. Large corporations are getting loans. These are not, by the way, forgivable loans. They're just loans, especially the airline industry, which has been especially hard hit by our situation. Support to health providers, hospitals, a lot of money going into hospitals and healthcare support. And free coronavirus testing will be provided, and God willing, when there's a vaccine, that will also be free. State and local governments will also be benefiting from a portion of this relief bill, and agriculture will be shored up as well. So those, just to run through quickly, those are the non-payroll items. Now let's talk about what everybody's most interested in, and those are the payroll items. And then at the end, I will give more details. I know you're asking about where will you get the SBA information and how will it all be put together, and that'll be part of what Malka is going to discuss with you as well. And yes, and for those of you who are asking, Viventium will be assisting its current customers with applying for these loans by giving them the payroll information that they need. We're going to talk about that further on into the webinar. Payroll items. So the biggest one is what's called the employee retention credit, which means if you keep your payroll going and keep on paying your employees, the federal government will pay up to 50% of that payroll, subject, of course, to certain limitations, which we will talk about on the next slide. You can't qualify for both the employee retention credit and the SBA PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. Now, obviously, if you're a small business, it's to your benefit to apply for the SBA, because there that's able to cover 100% of your payroll, at least for 8 weeks, and that's going to be a forgivable loan, assuming you keep your payroll going and you don't drop below certain thresholds. So that one would come first, but if for some reason you can't get the SBA loan, then you would definitely want to work on getting this employee retention credit, and we'll soon take a look at how you're going to get that, because that is very much a payroll credit. Another concession, another relief provision is that if there's any Social Security employer tax that you have to deposit in 2020, you don't have to deposit it in 2020. Meaning the deposits are going to be delayed, and Malka will give you more details about that. And then the FFCRA, which was the news 2 weeks ago, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which was the paid leave basically, has been expanded. We'll talk about that as well. And there's some additional provisions that we'll cover a little bit later in about being able to pay your employees to repay their student loans in a tax-free way. And in addition, access to retirement funds has been freed up a little bit, and we'll get to all of those. Right now, I want to focus on the first one up here in bold, the Employee Retention Credit. So let's take a look at the Employee Retention Credit. It applies, again, for those of you who are not applying or eligible for an SBA PPP loan. It applies to wages paid after March 12th through the end of the year. And the credit is for half of your payroll expense, plus whatever health insurance premiums you as the employer are paying for your employees. So that may sound a little familiar because in FFCRA, where we talked about paid leave, we said that if an employee goes on leave because they're subject to a quarantine or because they're caring for a child and you're continuing to pay their health insurance premiums, those premiums also qualify for the FFCRA credit, which offsets your federal tax deposits. So here too, when we talk about the Employee Retention Credit, which was introduced by CARES, that credit is also including the employer health premium. So that's an important piece of information for those of you who pay health insurance, which is probably most of you. However, it's limited to up to $10,000 per employee. So if you have larger earners, it's not going to really cover 50% of your expense. It'll cover up to $10,000 for each of those employees, but it's still better than nothing. Now, who gets this? Who is eligible for the Employee Retention Credit? And the answer is two groups of employers. One, those who are either fully closed because of a government order, such as restaurants, entertainment places, sports, or those whose operations are partially suspended. So let's say you can't have in-house company meetings because your in-house workplace is closed, and therefore various projects are being shelved, or the scope of your business is being reduced for whatever reason related to some type of a government order. So therefore, you would, if you're subject to this, then you would qualify for the credit. Or even if you're fully open and you're able to operate, you're an essential, whatever, you can qualify for the credit if your gross receipts for this quarter or for any quarter during 2020 are 50% less than the corresponding quarter of last year, meaning a significant decrease in business activity. Now, I see in the questions that there's a little bit of confusion about the start date of this credit. I'm saying that it's for wages after March 12th, and some of our listeners are saying we thought it started on April 1st. So I think that's an important question, and I want to just stop and answer that. The paid leave and the paid childcare, which was passed under FFCRA, the Families First Act, is only for leave from April 1st and on. Meaning if you ran payroll yesterday, you could not take credit for leave that was paid during March, even though the IRS originally said it's going to be an immediate credit, but DOL came out, Department of Labor, and they said, well, no, but this is only for leave that starts after April 1st. So yeah, the IRS credit is immediate, but it's only immediate for the credits that, for the paid leave that's being paid from April 1st and on. So that's where the April 1st date is coming from. However, the new credit, the credit that's part of the CARES Act, is effective for the employee retention credit portion of it, is effective for wages paid after March 12th. And you will still claim that credit as part of your second quarter credits that you're going to be claiming now. And we're going to talk about them. I'm going to show you on the form how you're going to do that. So just to make that clear, the FFCRA credits are as of April 1st for leave paid after April 1st, and the employee retention credit reaches back into March. Now, let's say you're an employer who had this 50% decline, or you've been closed or partially closed or whatever it is. Who do you get the credit for? Which payroll, which employees? So the answer is it depends. You have to look at your ACA definition of full-time employees. And the law specifically references the ACA definition. If you have more than 100 employees, then you get the credit if you keep on payroll workers who are not working, who are not able to work. So the example I like to give is, let's say you have a large accounting firm, which means you have accountants, you have bookkeepers, and you have cleaning, maintenance, and security staff. Okay, so now let's imagine then you're over 100 employees. Let's imagine that all of your accountants, bookkeepers are able to work from home. So they're on payroll and you're paying them. You cannot get a credit for those wages. However, your cleaning, maintenance, and security staff, who for obvious reasons are not at work because the office is closed, if you keep them on their payroll, on your payroll, you keep paying them, then 50% of what you pay them is a refundable credit from the IRS, meaning you can offset your tax deposits and you can get the rest of the money back. And even more relief is provided for employees with 100 or less employees, again, by the ACA definition. And there, wages paid to all your employees will qualify for the credit, even if they're not working, and even if they are working. So let's say you're an accounting firm with 50 employees, and your accountants and bookkeepers are working from home, your cleaning, maintenance, and security are not. What you pay to cleaning, maintenance, and security, and what you pay to accountants and bookkeepers, even though they're working, all of that, your entire payroll is eligible for the employee retention credit, and the IRS will pay half of your active payroll. Now, when we say 100, it's different than the FFCRA rule. The FFCRA rule, remember, you had to be less than 500 in order to pay leave under FFCRA and get the credit. That was a snapshot. It was 500 employees on the day that your employee went out on leave. However, the employee retention credit under CARES follows a different definition. It says you have to aggregate your groups, just like you do for ACA, right? If you're part of a aggregated group, and you're an ALE that belongs to a group of others, even if you have different EIN numbers, but you have common ownership according to the IRS's definition of aggregated group, so then you would be considered 100. So your credit would not be as great. It would only be for those employees who are actually not working. And of course, you can't just boost everyone's wages and ask for a credit. It has to be the equivalent of their 30-day equivalent. And the credit is not available for any of the paid leave, only for their actual wages other than the paid leave under Families First. There's also been an expansion of the Families First. Remember how we said in the earlier webinar, those of you who weren't there can refer back to the recorded version, the child care was only available for those employees, and that was 10 weeks of paid leave, was only available if your employee was on payroll for 30 days, past 30 days. So now that's been expanded by CARES. If anyone was laid off after March 1st, but they've worked 30 out of the past 60 days and then rehired, they can again go out on this paid 10 weeks leave. Okay, and the rationale behind that was that, a lot of employees got laid off as a result of coronavirus, and it wouldn't be so fair and if they've been rehired, we don't want to deny them the same benefits as employees who worked the whole time. And I think the biggest expansion of Families First was that any credits that you were going to get, remember they said you could offset them against your federal deposits, but then if there was anything extra, you had to file some type of a claim form and wait for the IRS to send it to you. Well, CARES said, IRS, we want you to give people this money in advance. We want it in advance credit. We don't want them to have to file some type of a form and wait. And so the IRS complied, and they, on a dime, they were amazing. They turned around and produced a new form called the 7200, and you won't need to claim it to wait for your excess credit. You can claim it in advance. And also the IRS has been tasked by Congress with developing regulations to waive penalties for failure to deposit certain taxes. We're awaiting those regulations. So let's meet Form 7200. And this is what it's going to look like. It's been released already. It's called the Advance Payment of Employer Credits Due to COVID. And it's available, if we zoom in a little bit, it's available for 3 kinds of credits, lines 1, 2, and 3. The employee retention credit for the quarter. And by the way, it would include also the first quarter wages that were paid after March 12th. You'd put that here. The qualified sick leave wage, that's under FFCRA. And the qualified family leave wage, that's the 10 weeks of paid leave for childcare. You put it down here, you add the lines up, and then you say, well, I've already reduced my federal deposits. I haven't made any 941 deposits for the past 3 weeks by whatever amount is on line 5. You put it whatever it is, however many weeks you've reduced already, and any advance credits on the previous times that you filed this form, and the difference is what you ask the IRS to send you. The IRS has not said how soon they'll send it to you, but they've said they will send it to you, and I think they'll be expeditious about it. It's important to note that this can be filed by you as often as needed during the quarter, and it's being faxed to the IRS. They're not even telling you to mail it to an address, which is very shocking because the IRS almost never allows for faxed in forms, and they are doing that now due to the situation. And again, it's cumulative reporting, meaning each time you file the 7,200 during a quarter, each time you fax it to the IRS, you show all of your credits for the whole quarter and all of the deposits that you've offset those credits against, and then you ask for the difference. So they want to cumulate, even if you've showed those amounts on earlier forms during the quarter, they want you to do the cumulative, the quarter to date amount of credit minus the quarter to date amount of offset, and that's what you are going to be asking them to give you back. And I happened to notice in the instructions something that may be a little bit of concern to some of our listeners or others, and that is that it's true that they're giving you an advance, but they're saying that if you have any past due tax account at all, whether it's payroll tax or corporate tax or individual, any kind of tax at all, if you're a sole proprietor and it's an individual tax, they will, well, actually they're saying under your EIN, so at least it's not going to apply to individual tax, but any tax under your EIN is going to get offset before they make this advance to you. So that's not such good news. If anybody's been having an ongoing debate with the IRS about even if it's an ACA, an ESRP, you know, an employer shared responsibility payment, they're gonna, before they send you back your money, they are gonna offset that against your account. Not sure if that was Congress's intent, but that is what the IRS has chosen to do. So that's just a little bit of a downside. Okay, Malka, I want to transfer this over to you for the remaining minutes that we have to our webinar to talk about some of the additional employer provisions, and then I'll take over and I'll try to, you know, address some of the questions that have been coming in.
Okay, thanks, Yonina. So moving on to some other aspects of the CARES Act. So as Yonina mentioned, the employer social security deposit for any taxes, any employer social security taxes that were incurred from the effective date of the CARES Act through the end of 2020 have a deferred deposit date. So they don't have to be paid on the regular, whatever, semi-weekly or monthly schedule. The deposits are due in 2 equal installments, the first on 12/31/2021. So over a year and a half from now, and the second on 12/31/2022. So definitely an important amount of relief for employers. Of course, this only applies if an employer has any employer social security. Many employers might be making use of that 50% retention credit or the paid sick leave tax credits, which of course reduce employer social security. But if an employer does have any leftover employer social security, that money is not due for a while, and of course it frees it up for other uses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, now we're going to talk about student loan repayments. So what the CARES Act does is it includes, there we go. It includes student loan repayments in educational assistance programs. So many of you might already be familiar with Section 127, which allows employers to help their employees out if they're going to school to get a degree. They can give the employees up to $5,250 annually, and that is not considered income to the employee. So what the CARES Act does is just expands the definition of the benefits allowed under Section 127 to include student loan repayments as well. So if you wanted to help out your employees in that way, that's an additional benefit and option. Getting into our retirement plans, there's a lot of changes here under the CARES Act. First of all, there's no penalty for early withdrawal of up to $100,000 of retirement funds for any time in 2020. So as many of you are familiar with, if you take out your money from your 401k early, you might be hit with a withholding penalty. That doesn't apply for 2020. In addition, individuals can repay that money back into their retirement plan over the next 3 years. And if there's any taxes that are due on that withdrawal that they made this year, those taxes are spread over 3 years. So essentially, the CARES Act allows for immediate access to pension funds with a redeposit option after the crisis is over. In addition, individuals have an option to take out 401k loans, and the limit has increased from $50,000 to $100,000, giving them more access to their funds. And those who have turned 72 or older have always been required to make minimum distributions. They have to withdraw money from their 401k or their 403b or their IRA each year. That has been suspended for 2020. Withdrawals are not required. They can be made. They're not required, and then those individuals don't have to deal with the taxes on those required minimum distributions. Okay. And coming back to these SBA loans, which is a very important topic, I'm sure to many of you. So as Yonina mentioned, it's not really a payroll item per se. However, there is a payroll piece to this puzzle, and Viventium is here to help our clients to fill that piece. As many of you are aware, in order to apply for these loans, the maximum amount of a loan that an employer can apply for is 2.5 times their average monthly payroll expense. And when they're going to submit that application through their bank, they are going to be asked, what is your average monthly payroll expense? So we are in the process of creating a report, especially geared towards this SBA loan. It will be ready in our report library early next week, and the report is going to be able to run for the period of months that apply to your situation, and it's going to show all the payroll expenses for each month and then give you an average over the time period that you have run the report, so that amount can be used for your SBA loan application. Payroll expenses that can be included in the loan are wages, compensation, which is capped at $100,000 per employee. If you're running that report over a less than 12-month period, then it's going to be $100,000 prorated over the months that you run the report for, because it's $100,000 annual cap. Other expenses that are allowed are state and local employer taxes and any contributions that you may have made to the employee's retirement plan or to pay for their health insurance. Okay, so that report will be out early next week, and we're going to have more forthcoming information on that. So that pretty much wraps up the CARES aspect of this webinar. I'm going to just send it back to Yonina to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Malka. I want to address a question that a lot of you have been asking, and that is regarding the handout of the slides of today's webinar. You will be receiving an email after the webinar is over, and it will include the slides as well as the recording of the webinar. So those of you who want to refer back to any of the information that's been contained here will be able to do that. And I just want to end, I know we're actually a couple minutes over, with a question that we've been getting regarding IRS Section 139. Now, Section 139 in the Internal Revenue Code was enacted after 9/11. And it basically allows employers to make what's called disaster relief payments to their employees to cover expenses that the employees may be suffering as the result of a disaster. And it only applies in the time of the federally declared disaster. Now, this is now a federally declared disaster that we are living through. And so many clients have been asking me, can we make Section 139 payments? And the answer, of course, that I'm always going to give is that Viventium is not providing legal advice, and so you do want to check with your legal counsel. Presumably, Section 139 was kind of made to deal with, an attack or a natural disaster, kind of things we have in mind, or where people's, roofs are caving in from a hurricane, or, basements are flooded and their employer wants to make them a gift, but a non-taxable gift, they can invoke Section 139. Presumably, such type of payments to give your employees relief would apply now. However, I want to stress that this does not apply, or it probably does not apply, to income replacement payments. So you can't say, well, I'm continuing to pay my employees' payroll even though my offices are closed or my employee can't work, and so that's relief, and that should be not taxable. The intent of the section was not to be there for income replacement, but rather to reimburse employees for expenses that are going on in their lives. So I just want to stress, and I know there's a lot of talk out in the industry about Section 139, and you'll be getting emails and information. There's nothing that can replace the opinion of your own tax advisor, CPA, or attorney. And we can Of course, at Viventium, we can make referrals if you need, but we would always advise you before making a Section 139 disaster relief payment and calling it not taxable to check with your legal counsel. And I just want to end up, for those of you who were able to stay, and I appreciate that you were able to stay a little extra time to answer just a couple of the questions that came in. One question was regarding the employee retention credit. If my receipts are the same as in prior years, but my offices were closed, am I eligible? And the answer is yes. Even if your receipts for a given quarter were able to keep up because you have people working from home or whatnot, but your offices have been closed due to a government order, you would still be eligible for the retention credit. Another question, which I'm not going to give you a definitive answer on because it's out of the scope of payroll, but I want to put the question out there to know that you're not alone in asking it. And the question is, I said earlier, you can't get both the PPP, that's the SBA loan, which is a forgivable loan, assuming you meet thresholds of retaining payroll. You can't get that and also get the 50% payroll for 50% payroll credit for retaining your employees. It's one or the other. So a few of you have been asking, well, what if I apply for both? Like, what if I want to claim the advance credit on the 7,200 at the same time I'm applying through my bank or through my authorized SBA lender for the PPP loan? Can I take one until the other one comes through? Am I going to have to pay funds back? What if I get an advance on my PPP loan? Because I understand that the SBA may be issuing advances even before approvals are granted. All these are excellent, excellent questions. And again, this is why I want to go back to what I said before, that this is really not a payroll issue. I just want to put the question out there. It is something that you would need to consider before you would fill out Form 7200 and ask for an advance against your employee retention. You would want to reach out to your CPA or to your attorney. And again, those of you who are with Viventium can certainly turn to us for referrals and resources, but you would want to check that out in terms of the interplay of these two laws. And we can expect further guidance will be coming up in the upcoming days, both from IRS and Department of Labor, and of course from the SBA. And do check your inboxes, those of you who are with us, because we'll be providing periodic updates. We also want to refer all of our clients to what we call the VCUC, the Viventium Coronavirus Update Center, where there's a lot of important information that's continually updated, both on the federal and on the state level. So you'll want to be checking there for all recent information. And on behalf of Malka and myself, I want to wish everyone to stay safe and to weather all of this in the best way possible. And we're here for you with any questions that you may have. Please do feel free to reach out in response to this webinar, and we will try to reach out to you. And as I said, all of our participants will be receiving a copy of the slides and the recording. Thank you so much, everyone, and continue having a great morning. Bye-bye.